Today we're going to talk about details, how to make them, how to use them. This is a model I built last year. It's a nice little structure, but it has no pizzazz. What is missing is details. Now here's that same model loaded with details. And it's these type of details that really make a difference in our models. Some of the details that you see here are lobster traps. This helps to give an idea of where your model is located. Another common item we find everywhere is a simple, basic picnic table. Very easy to make, but very common. Crates, like the crate behind the table, and these crates here, all are very simple to make, all add a very nice detail to your model. We look around the model itself, we can see there's shelves under this little lean-to with junk on the floor and junk on the shelves, and some of these have labels, some of them don't, and some of the parts are just little oddball parts out of your junk box. Most of us have a scrap box of all kinds of pieces, and sometimes we can just use those to add a little bit of detail to our models. Just scraps of wood, different odds and ends. Well, when it comes to details, are we going to buy them or are we going to make them? Well, you can buy many details, but some you have to make, or you have to make them simply because you enjoy doing it or to save a few dollars. Now that's what I like to do, and that's what we're going to cover here today, how to make easy details for your models. But what kind of details to use? To understand the kind of details that really make a realistic look to your model, you need to look around you in real life. Our memories are bad, so taking photos is a great way to save ideas about interesting details that you can make. When I travel, I always carry my camera and stop to photograph anything that might be of interest to me later. I look for piles of junk, rusty old farm equipment, old weathered buildings, and I really like sheds and lean-tos that are filled with junk. These ideas are everywhere. And if they're not in your hometown, then you can always search the internet for photos. It also helps to keep notes about ideas for details as well. So let's get started. We've been looking at a few details here. This one is an old boat. I found this along the coast of Oregon, just set aside. Here in Washington, this detail photo shows a lot about how the roofs are built and how buildings are weathered and how they fall apart. Here in Maine, found a collection of lobster traps that were actually lining an area there like a garden. Different uses for details. And there's always so many interesting pieces of equipment and junk laying around. One of the most common, but most overlooked details is the simple addition of a bird's nest and a couple of birds. Birds' nests are everywhere, but we rarely see them modeled. The best material I've found is to actually get some tree roots, very small tree roots, and there on those roots are some very, very fine little roots. And those are what we want to work with. Those make good looking scale twigs like a bird would use for building a nest. So we just want to carefully remove those. We don't want any of those big pieces. All we want is that real fine material. And you want about half a thimble full. That's all you need for a project like this. Now for glue, I'm going to start by using silicone sealant. This is clear. And I just take a little bit of that silicone sealant and I actually just take a little bit on a toothpick and actually put it right on my surface. And then I put some of these little twigs on there and I push them down. After it's set up and dry, I remove all that I can, and then I take a round paintbrush I'm going to take that round paintbrush and I'm going to put it right in the very middle of where this nest is. And this is going to make the opening in the nest. Here I have to pound it down a little bit and break some of those so I can really get it down there. Then I just pile some around the base of that paintbrush. Then I take some ordinary Elmer's glue. This is mixed about 2 parts of water to about 1 part of Elmer's glue. And I'm going to drench this quite thoroughly. Now it looks like I'm going to have just a big glob of glue there, but there's so much water in this mixture that it will evaporate out and it will look fine. It'll be no problem at all. Once you do that, you want to crush and push all these up against the brush. Get it just as tight as you can. You can even use tweezers if you want to make it tight, and then just push it down, twist that brush, and pull it up and remove it, and that's going to leave a little cavity in there. That's going to be where the babies are. After it's completely dry, scrape it off your surface. You can do this on wax paper, but wax paper looked funny in the video, so I had to shoot it on just a piece of black plastic. But you really want to let this dry. Of course, I removed this a little bit before it's completely dry, but it's still flexible at that point. Then you want to take some scissors. You want to just very carefully start cutting away the outside and excess parts of this. Just keep cutting until you're right down to that little opening. And here I've turned it over to let it completely dry some more. Now the birds I use are from Pricer. It's part number 10169. These are HO scale birds. I've used some of the larger ones out of this package before, so we're working with some of the smaller ones that are in there. And we just take one of those and we just glue it onto the edge of the nest. I use 2-part epoxy, 5-minute epoxy to glue these on. Once it's glued on, there's your bird at your bird's nest. Very nice little model, just the way it is. This is the kind of detail that judges really like, so if you're at a contest, be sure to note it, or otherwise people won't notice it. Now, I wanted to put some lining in my nest, so I used a little bit of lint. Very, very tiny amount of lint. This is sort of like the feathers that a bird would use to soften the interior of its nest. You push the lint down in there and take some of those little tiny birds, and you can just put them down inside there to look like baby birds, or they actually look sort of like eggs once they're down in there. Just drop them down in. They're not going to fall out or anything. Just push them down in place and you got some baby birds for that mama bird to be taken care of. Great little detail. Nobody may notice those little birds, but they're there. Picnic tables are very common. We've all seen them. They look very nice on a model. They're very easy to build and don't take any time, and they don't cost much. The plans for them are readily available online. I did a search for picnic table plans and found this set. Shows all the dimensions, the sizes, how it's put together. An excellent job. You can see the URL there so that you can find these exact ones and download these plans for yourself. Of course, these plans are too large, so we want to scan them into the computer and shrink them down to 1/4 inch scale, or HO scale if you're building an HO. If you don't know how to do that, you might ask your grandson or the neighborhood kid to help you do that part. So here we have them. 1/4 inch scale, and this shows all the dimensions so we can use those for cutting accurate cuts right off of that. Now for stain, I'm using Dr. Ben's aged driftwood. This is an excellent stain, very much like the old Floquil driftwood. I've got some scale 2x4s and 2x6s here. I've got them stained already. Going to cut them to length and start the build. I'm taking some Scotch Magic Mending tape, cutting out 3 pieces. I've got the piece of graph paper taped to my work surface. We're going to tape the longer piece of this tape down with the sticky side up. To do that, we put a piece of tape at one end, hold it down and put the piece of tape at the other end, keeping it nice and flat. That way we can just put our pieces of wood right on there and do our building right there. So what we're going to do is I've cut my 2x4s to the right length, and I'm going to start laying them out using this graph paper as a guide. Just start at the bottom, make sure you get it vertical, which is a good thing with using the graph paper. We're going to put enough pieces on here so this is a scale 28 inches wide. So we just lay these next to each other. I leave a small gap between them. On picnic tables, they're generally built so there's a small gap between the boards on the top so that things that spill just go right through, and when it rains on it, the rain doesn't pool up, it just drains right through. Very nice touch, a very good thing to do with a real picnic table, something we want to do with our scale model as well. As you can see here, by counting these squares, each is a 1/4 inch for a foot in O scale, makes it very easy to see how tall it is. This is 28 inches wide, and the tabletop is going to be 6 feet long. The next part I'm going to do is I'm going to do some gluing using Elmer's glue, and we're going to glue the supports for the tabletop. These supports are cut from 2x4 again. These are the exact length from left to right for the tabletop. Put a tiny amount of glue on there. One thing nice about Elmer's is it works very well. You can use a very tiny amount and it works great. So we're going to put this about 2 scale inches from the top. Just want to get it lined up just right. And then we want to put one in the middle. Since this is 6 feet long, you can just count down 3 squares and see where the center of the table is. Sorry about my shoulder getting in the way there, but that just happens sometimes when I'm filming these things. Awfully hard to have you look over my shoulder all the time without my shoulder getting in the way once in a while. Again, that's 3 feet down, and we're going to add one more. This other one we're going to add right down at the bottom. Again, we're going to leave a little 2-inch gap between the bottom and the end of the table itself. Now that we have the top of the table ready, we're going to go to work on the legs. Now, by having a 1/4 inch scale plan, it makes it very easy for us to actually cut the legs to the proper length. I'm putting this blade there right where the edge is, lining up the wood exactly on top of that template we have there. And using a very sharp razor blade, I cut right across the top. Using the plan for the table as a guide, this gives me a cut that's going to work just right. I want to be very careful in making these cuts, but they're still very simple to make. Having made one at the top, go ahead and cut one right across the bottom as well. Okay, now that's going to be our master. It's going to be our masterpiece. We're going to make 3 more just that size. And to do that, we take the master and lay it on one of the pieces of wood, and we're going to cut that again with our sharp blade. First one in and then the other, and that gives us exact matches. By always using that first piece as a template or as a master, it keeps all our legs the same length. So we've got all 4 cut there, so we're ready to go ahead with the next step, which is actually gluing them in place. Now we're going to have a piece that comes across here. This is the part that holds the seat. We're going to go ahead and we're going to cut that, get a couple of those made that are the right size as well. Okay, that was very easy to do. Now I'm putting some Scotch Magic mending tape down. I have it with the sticky side up. Put a piece at one end, then a piece at the other. That holds it right over that plan so that we can actually just press our pieces of wood right down onto the plan. So we want to put the first leg in place, lining it up very carefully Want to put it in place. And then we want to take a scrap piece of wood and put it across the top. This represents the table top. So by having that flush across the top of that first leg, then when we put the second leg in place, all we have to do is put it flush with that piece on top as well. Very easy to do. Go ahead, we get that put into place. Nice and easy, nice and straight. Got to get these straight. If they're crooked, it won't look good at all. So you want it to be really nice and straight. Add a little tiny drop of glue on each side. Doesn't take an awful lot of glue, but there has to be enough. So put a little bit of glue on each side. Experience sort of shows you how much you actually need to have there for this to hold together well. Having the glue in place, next we're going to take one of the boards that runs across that supports the seat and we glue it into place. After it's glued into place, then we pull this up from the wax paper. Running a knife under frees it a little bit, but you got to be very careful pulling this up. So that gives you your first set of legs. So you make another one just like that. Flip your table over. Put a little bit of glue right on the ends of the legs like this. And we're just going to glue that into place. Just like that. Of course, we're going to need something to prop that up because that's going to fall down if we just try to leave it like that. So I use a variety of different things for props. This is a piece of, a square piece of basswood that's got one corner shaved off. That corner that's on the bottom there is shaved off. So we just put that up, glue that in place, glue the other one in place, flip this over. Now we're going to put our seats on. Again, our seats are made out of the same wood as at the top. It's going to be 2x4s. We're going to put a couple of 2x4s on each side. And these are the same length as the top of the table. In this case, it's 6 feet. You can make it 8 feet long or 6 feet. And 6 feet is just the size we're building this one. I find a lot of small details always looks better to me than to have large details. And after we get those glued on both sides, we flip our little table over and we're going to add the braces. We've cut these braces ahead of time according to the plan. And we're just going to glue one in place on this end, then we'll put one in place on the other end. And that'll supply the support for the table. By having that plan to cut your pieces from, it makes sure that they all fit together nicely. And we always want to take the time to do this right. I take even the smallest details, like this little table, and do it absolutely the best I can. Rather than just being sloppy about it, I take the time to do it just right. Now if you sat in the middle of that seat right there, well, you'd probably break through. So it needs a support. It needs a 1x4 that runs across the bottom to left to right to provide support. So again, we've cut that to piece to fit. Now this I actually fit to the particular model, so it'd be just right, so it would fit easily. Add a little tiny bit of glue and drop it right into place like such. Put one on the other side, and that provides the support that we need for the model. There's our little table. Now it's a little wobbly. See, if I put my fingers at one end to the other, it wobbles a little bit. That means the legs need to be adjusted a bit. So I'm going to file off just a little bit off of this leg, and then the diagonal leg across from it. That one down there. Just a little bit, and then test it to see how it sets. Okay, much better, much better. That's going to be nice. It looks sort of silly on your layout if one leg was off the ground. Okay, we just want to make sure everything is fine. Now I got these little tabs that extend over there. You can snip those off, or just take a moment with an emery board that I use as a file and just sand that down really quickly. I keep a large selection of emery boards at all time for my model building. Well, now we're going to start doing some painting, and we're going to work on painting this, and I'm using Dr. Ben's colors exclusively for painting this. Now this red is a very nice red. Now the red we're using here is called Rustic Barn Red, and it's pretty much the color of so many barns, and it was such a common cheap paint it was used an awful lot. But I don't use just the red straight. What I have is some of the realistic oak stain, and I actually mix the two together in this little cup, and I start brushing it on. I don't put real heavy coats of paint on. I put on enough to cover it, but just barely. I'm not really trying to cover it and make a thick protective coat since it's just a model. And we're going to remove a lot of these colors as time goes on. Once you get the bottom of it painted, flip it over, and we'll go to work on the upper surfaces. Now these are the ones that are really going to be the most visible. So again, I have that mix of the brown and the red. Well, I mix those together and I change it as I go through so that the different pieces of wood are never exactly the same color. Let me set that down. Okay, here I'm working on one seat using that mix. Before I go to the next part, I'm going to add some more brown to that mix. Then I'm going to start with a couple of boards on the table top. A little bit more to make it more of a brown color. Stroke that on like that. Now I'm going and adding more of a red to add more red to the color. By working back and forth between the two colors, you change the colors of the boards themselves so that they look like they've been out in the weather for a while. If you're modeling a brand new picnic table, you just want to paint it the straight red. But I weather everything on my layout. I can't think of anything other than water that I don't weather to some degree. So there you can see the variation in colors across the top of the wood. Now this stain has dried at this point. I'm taking an emery board and I'm just filing the area where you set. You know, people set on the ends of these things more than they set any place else. But we just want to file down the whole thing like that. And then we want to file the top too, just to get rid of a lot of that color. We still want the color there, but we just want it to be toned down quite a bit. And then on the opposite side, of course, to do it for the other area for setting in. See, it's a pretty strong little bench. Just that little bit of glue we used allows me to use quite a bit of force here in doing this. Of course, you don't want to break it. Okay, so there we have it all pretty much done. Now the stuff underneath, I'm not going to weather it very much. I'm just going to leave it. Just concentrate on the top of the table and the seats. So we want to rough up these pieces of wood. After a while outside, what starts off as real nice pieces of pine, before long they start getting all cracked and weather beaten. So we're just going to rough those surfaces up. I'm going to begin by using not the sharp edge of this number 11 X-Acto blade, but I'm using the back side of it. Very important to use the back side rather than the front side. It produces more of a gouging effect. So I've gone ahead and done the rest of the top that way. You can see I've gouged it quite a bit. And the seats are still pretty smooth. See, people sit on those, so those don't get weathered as much. Now here's a wire brush, and I'm going to brush this. This gets rid of any fuzz that was left over from the scuffing up portion. Plus it also adds a lot more softer grain to the wood as well. And I'm going to do that a little bit on the seats just to add some grain on the seats as well. Just like that. Now run my finger across it. Now you can use an emery board again to smooth this down a little bit. We're just trying for lots of variety in the texture of the wood here. That's what we're really shooting for, is variety. Okay, so there's our little table. Pretty nice. Gotten rid of most of the fuzz on it. We're set for the next part. Now here I have some alcohol with some India ink mixed in it. Just about a spoonful of India ink into a bottle of alcohol will work. If it needs to be darker, just add more ink. If it's too dark, pour some of it out, add some more alcohol. And I just brush this over the surface just to sort of gray the exposed portions of the wood. Now here we're going to use some more of Dr. Ben's product. These are powders. These are powders that are good for staining things and adding dust effect. Got a nice light color brown there, and then we got a darker color. That lighter color I'm working with to start with is Dusty Buff, and the darker color is Saddle. Now I'm putting very small amounts of each on the top of the table. I'm not trying to cover the whole thing. I just want some, a little spot of the dark here, a little spot of the dark here, and a little bit of the lighter color the same way, just small amounts. And what we're going to do, we're actually going to rub these in. Rub these into this. I want to make sure we don't have too much on there, and cleaning my brush a bit before I start to rub it in. We want to make sure that we don't provide a uniform color on the top of this. We want it to look like it's had use. The picnic table at our house, I use it for cutting wood for my layout. My in-laws have put motorcycle motors on it, changed oil, just all kinds of stuff. Picks up all kinds of stains. These are just really utility things that just accumulate a whole bunch of different colors. I often spray my models on. I just set it on top and spray it with a spray can. So there's all kinds of different colors there. So we just want some color variation. We want it to show that it's been used. And that's what we're doing here. Just add a little bit at a time. You can always add more, but this stuff, when you put it on, you can't get it off. So you want to make sure you put just very small amounts and work very carefully until it looks just the way you want it to look. So I'm brushing off some of the excess here because then we're going to go ahead with our next step. It's looking pretty good so far. We're going to take some Uncle Ben's natural basswood. You can see that this is a creamy color. It's the color of raw strip wood. When it dries, it's very close. So this is a very, very tiny brush, and I'm picking up very tiny amounts of this. And I'm not going to paint the whole table. This is dry brush. See, I'm getting rid of most of it. And I'm just going to come and just work different areas and add just a little bit of highlight, like along the edge of the table where it gets worn. And then rub my finger along just to work that in a little bit. We don't want it to be strong. We want it to be a very light highlight. Then we're going to add highlights again on the bench, on the area where you sit with your feet on the inside, and then just a little bit on the outside. And we're going to add even a little bit of this right on top as well as on the edges of this. Working it a little bit at a time. Again, very small amounts of paint. Like with the dust, you can always add more paint, but once it's there, awfully hard to take it off. These are very thin paints, easy to work with. You don't need to dilute them or thin them. They're good to use just right as you open the jar. Okay, now I'm going to go along the tops of the table and just add some highlights, like where some of the raw wood is showing through. This just brightens it up a little bit. In our layout rooms, they all tend to be very dark. No matter how many lights you put in there, it's not nearly as dark as it is outside in the sunlight. So for things to look good, you have to lighten the colors quite a bit. That's what I'm doing here. Just adding some highlights with this, just enough to not bring it into that light cream color, but just to bring out the colors a little bit. And again, just very light amounts of color there. And you can see the color variation there, how it's looking. It's looking pretty good. There's different things you can do, different kind of stains you can add, of course, but it looks pretty good like that. Now, this is a piece of strip wood or balsa, and you can see how the color is very similar and how it shows through. And of course, what you could always do on a model like this is made from wood to show these stains and rubbed areas right at the edges. You could scrape it with a knife. But this technique works just as well with something made from plastic as it does made from wood. So there's our table. You can see all the fine details in there. You can put a knot hole in there if you like. All in all, just a very easy, very nice little thing to add to your layout. Another very interesting looking, a fairly common thing to find is lobster traps, especially if you're building a model any place along the water. Of course, today, if you travel through Maine, you find gift shops and junk places. Even individuals at yard sales sell these things. It's a real market. Now, the flexible part for the hoops was the hardest part to come up with. And I found that just taking a simple cardstock like on a box of cereal, it's already gray on one side and you just want to paint the other side gray. You can even use one of those envelopes from the post office that your priority mail stuff comes in. It's nice on one side, still flexible, and that's what we really want. But we need to paint the other side and get it to where it looks like old weathered wood. Now I'm going to be using Uncle Ben's stains here. And again, this is Uncle Ben's aged driftwood. And we're just going to put this on. We're not trying to put an even coat all over it. We just want to put it on haphazard. We're going to follow it up with another color here shortly. We're going to add some of Uncle Ben's natural pine. After the first coat is completely dry, then we come back and we add a coat of this. And again, we're going to, while it's going on pretty even there, we're really not trying to make it super even. After that is completely dry, come back over it again with some of your aged driftwood. And this is not really critical, but you just want it to have some variation in the colors. You don't want it to be a uniform gray. Rarely is wood, old weathered wood, a uniform gray. Once that's done, we cut it into real thin strips. About a scale 2 inches wide is how wide these strips are. And all those strips there are from that paper. Now I've drawn a little template here on some graph paper. You can see that these are each 3 squares wide. This is 1/4 inch square paper. 3 squares wide, and 1, 2, 3, 4 feet long. So 1 inch by 3/4 inch. And in between, I've got little squares drawn. And what we're going to do, I've put some tape down with the sticky side up and taped it down. And what we're going to do, we're actually going to push this strip right down along the side of one side. I want to make sure it's straight, of course. And here, using that graph paper really makes it easy to do, to keep it straight. So we got enough here. We're going to make about 4 lobster traps at one time. And we're just going to put another strip. This time we're going to put it right down the middle. See, I've got that line drawn right down the middle. Well, we're going to have this go right down the middle of that. And then we're going to add one more, and we're going to put it over on the right-hand side. Now, don't worry too much at the tops and the bottoms how accurate this is, because we're going to be making cuts on those lines that I have drawn across. Main thing we want to do is make sure that we get this all on there nice and straight. These are going to be the flexible ribs or hoops that the other boards are actually in real life nailed to, but we're going to glue things to them, of course. Okay. Very easy. And you can see again, this is 3/4 of an inch wide, one. Okay, and coming down, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are 4 feet long. Again, make sure they're nice and straight. Okay. Okay, and we're going to be cutting on those lines there. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and glue some parts on here. Those are little X areas. We're going to cut those away between each one of these. So what we're going to do is we got some wood, and we're just going to glue that wood in strips across like this. Of course, we're not going to use big wood like this. We're going to use small wood. And I used just bundles of whatever I had. This is 12 1/1000ths by 1/16 in O scale. We just want very thin wood, and I don't think when you go to Maine and look at the lobster traps, they probably use a fairly common size because of materials being made. But if they didn't have that size, I doubt that they would send out for it. They'd just use whatever they happen to have available. Now, one thing that makes details look nice is for the pieces to be small. So we want these to be as small as possible. So here I'm taking Elmer's glue, and I'm putting little strips of glue along on those cardboard strips. And then we're putting these links these are 1-inch links in O scale, and we're putting them as close together as I can with the tweezers. I'm sort of letting the edge of the tweezers be what provides a gap. And this cardboard material underneath is going to be curved. So we want to continue just gluing those on down until we get down towards the bottom, and then we want to leave a gap there in the right-hand corner of each one. That would be where the lobster would actually climb into the trap. So we want smaller portions right there. We're just going to put smaller sticks on there, right down to the very bottom. Okay, and then of course we push that down, and we're going to let that dry. We can get rid of like the glue that's there. I keep a lot of dry paint brushes around. Hold it down and just wipe over the surface with a dry paintbrush, and it picks it right up, all the extra glue. Okay, so we've done one on top, so we're just going to do another one right down below. And again, that gap there in the center where the X is, we're going to remove that portion, but we're actually going to build something else on that X portion later. But right now, we're just going to stick with building these. Now, here, I build these 4 at a time. I'm not going to show you me building 4 of them. That'd be pretty boring. But just to get the idea of how these are actually laid out and how they're actually put together. And again, just being very careful on the top one, and just putting some more down. And again, we're right down there at the bottom with the ones on the left, and leaving that area for the lobster to get in on the right. Very straightforward, very easy to do. You don't have to be super careful about aligning these boards. They just sort of nailed them, and they would fix these, and they'd use whatever they had, and some of these would be weathered in different ways. But in the used lobster business, they have to be used in order to sell. They sell these used lobster traps. They use them for a season and sell them. So again, it's 3/4 of an inch wide, 1 inch tall for each piece, and then we leave that little opening there. Now here's a photograph of an actual lobster trap. Now this one doesn't have boards on the end, which we're going to add, but the reason I chose this photo is it really allows us to see how they're put together, and see there's gaps. The gaps in the wood varies, but the part we really have been working on is this curved part. That's what that cardboard was that curve strip. We wanted something that was easy to curve, but would still hold its shape. And that's what we did. Now we're going to cut at the top. If you use a sharp blade, it's much easier. I use this old dull blade, but I don't like to change these. I'm sort of lazy. And you cut it at the top and you cut right across the bottom like that. So you cut each individual piece free. And what we're going to do then is we're going to wrap that over a fairly large paintbrush handle. You just sort of get a feel for it there. Now on this one I'd cut off a little extra piece where the lobster goes in, but you'll see I'm using a correct piece a little later. Now on that X area there, I've put 3 pieces of wood. They're a 1/2 inch tall, and again it's that same skinny wood, and I've just lined them up right across the center, and I'm putting 4 little tiny drops of glue on each one, because we're going to put 4 of those little strips of wood right onto this X, and this is going to be the bottom of the lobster trap. So just line that up. Be as careful as you can, but just go ahead and get those on there. And this is going to be part of the bottom of the trap. Okay, once you get them on there, let them dry completely. I always like to take away the extra glue. I find these little paintbrushes are easy to clean. Now here I flipped it over. Okay, and I'm going across again, and I'm putting another 1/2 inch strip at 3 different points on there. So again, this has been flipped over, so this is on the back side of what we were working on. And again, I went online and found plans for a lobster trap. A lot of different kinds, but I found the one that looked like what I wanted. And it gave dimensions, and some places actually have like little things on how to build them. So once that's dry, you take that first piece we have that we built and we curved, and we want to glue it right on to the back of the bottom here. And then we just want to slide something up behind it to hold it in place until it dries. And then we want to let that set until that is thoroughly dry. Then we're going to add little drops of glue right along the 3 hoops on the inside there. Coming up from underneath, put in glue on those 3 different parts. And I'm going to start by gluing just 2 parts. And once it's set, then I'm going to glue that 3rd one. It's hard enough to get 2 of them glued without having to do all 3. And then you glue that 3rd one down, and then there's your basic lobster trap. So we're ready now to add some pieces of wood across the ends. So that's what we're going to do now. We're just going to round it out. If it's not perfectly round, you can use that paintbrush and round it out so it's pretty round. It doesn't have to be perfectly round. Even in real life, these things aren't perfect. So that's the basic thing. Now we just put glue across the bottom and all the way around. And then we're going to put some more of these little slats of wood on there. And we're going to let them overhang. Rather than trying to cut them to the right size, it's easier just to let them overhang. Let me get it so this is in the camera. It's really fun making these videos, but one of the hard parts is getting it and keeping it focused. You know, that's a real tight focus there. That thing's about the size of your thumbnail, and keeping focused on that and keeping myself out of the way is part of the challenge of doing this, but I enjoy doing it. And we just put these boards on here. If you may not be as old and shaky as I am, but I get these things built, and if I can build them, anybody can build them. Just takes a little bit of time, and you need to enjoy doing this. If you don't enjoy doing this, it's going to become work. But I certainly enjoy making as many of the details I can myself. So we put the parts on that end, and then we just flipped it over, and we're doing the exact same thing up at this end. We're putting the hoops and everything here on this end as well. Okay, and right on that little piece of cardboard that's there too. And we just want to put these in place just like we did at the other end. And then we want to let this dry. Once we get these in place, we want to let it dry until it's thoroughly dry. When I build models, I generally build 3 or 4 items at a time so that while one piece is drying, I can be working on something else. Well, see, rather than fitting those to exact length, I find it's much easier just to glue long pieces on than taking some rail nippers or flush cutting dikes, trim away the excess. Now here's some bridal veil. You get this, you go down to the bridal shop, the fabric store, and you buy some of this. A square foot will last you a lifetime. And this is going to be the netting that lines the inside of the lobster trap. So we just put some glue around the opening of the doorway there where the lobster glows through. Pick up that netting, put it on the end of your paintbrush, and shove it down inside. Get it down inside as best you can, and then let that thoroughly dry. And once that's thoroughly dry, you just come and you trim away all the different parts of it. And there you end up with a nice little bit of castings. Now the first one will take you quite a while to do. But before long, if you sit down and just work at it, you can build an awful lot of these in a hurry. Just a nice little bit of detail. Need to trim it down on this end too. And just snipping these off is very easy to do. The cost on something like this is virtually nothing. Maybe a nickel, you know. But that's about it. And it's a great looking piece of detail. Now I'm going to take that one that I have done here, and I'm going to put it with a pile of other ones that I already had on this model. And this model won second place in structures at a recent narrow gauge convention. I just put that right in place with the others. That's all there is to it, and we're done with that. Another kind of detail that I really enjoy and I include frequently on my models, both on the inside and on the outside, are shells loaded with details. So we're going to talk about how to build them, and we're actually going to cast them and so that you can make hundreds of these shells in a very short period of time. I'm just taking some styrene. This is thin styrene, and it's 1/4 of an inch wide to represent a foot in O scale. You'd want smaller or larger in other scales according to what you're doing. And I start with a large saw with rough blades on it, then a finer saw, finally brush it with a wire brush, and then take the back side of my X-Acto knife, not the front side, but the back side, and just scratch it some more. And then just brush it to get rid of any of the filings that's there. Now this is one of those little scrub brushes that you use in the kitchen, Scotch-Brite, I think. And anyway, you rub that and that takes off any little lint that's left on there. So you just want to be careful to get off as much of the lint as you can. We're actually going to use this in making our mold, our master casting. So there you can see how it's got grain in it. And we're cutting pieces. In this case, it's 5 feet long. That's how wide I wanted my shelves to be, was 5 feet wide. You can make them any width you want, but 5 feet is what I happen to pick for this. So I've got a bunch of them cut. Now the ones on top are longer than the ones on the bottom. And the way you make the longer ones is you just take 2 pieces, put it up against one of the shelves that's going to be the shelves inside the case, and to come up with the one on the top you want it longer by 2 board widths. So I made a couple of those. And here, this is actually where I'm going to build my mold and do my molding for this. This is just a piece of stiff plastic. It's about 60 thousandths of an inch thick. Plastruck is who makes it. Lots of other companies make it too. You can get this from Evergreen. There's different places you can get it. And here I've made some marks on there. I've made these different marks, and those are marks I'm actually going to build a shelf around each one of those marks in the center. what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one of these 1-foot wide boards that's 5 feet long on one side of the line, and then I'm going to put the other on the other side of the line. So we're going to end up with several different shelves there, and we're going to work with these. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, well, several. So anyway, for this one I'm going to have 3 shelves. 2 of them are the shorter shelves, and one on the end on the right. Now at the top is a little bit longer. That's going to be for the top and bottom shelves for our cabinet. So once those are glued down in place, here's the type thing. Now this is a commercially available casting. You see it's got a little back on the back of it, and it's got some grain in it. And here's a little box on top with a little tool and a little gear, maybe out of a watch, and another gear, maybe out of a watch, and a couple of little tools, and some nondescript parts. You know, some of those things I just don't know exactly what those things are. So there's a little piece, and you know, that looks like a gear, some tools, and an odd piece. Don't know what that is. This certainly looks like it come out of a watch. And a little tools, and then some cans and some boxes. So we're going to talk about doing cans and boxes and a few little things you can add on. If you've got an old clock or a wristwatch, you can scavenge some gears from it, or you can just use castings. You know, I have a large collection of castings from different companies. Now, you don't want to make copies of these and sell it, of course, but you should feel free to make copies for your own use. So here's just a bunch of different nondescript things that could be used. Here's an old hinge laying on top of the counter would make a nice detail. A roller from somewhere, sort of a nondescript piece. You know, what is that? Oh, I'm not quite sure what that is, as I've had it for so long. Looks like a drain pipe from an eave on a roof. A little box. So we're actually going to use some of these things, and we're going to build some similar things. But you can use these, or you can just build what you want to use. You can even take something like this. Is from a Grant line gondola, O-scale gondola kit. Some little plates there that you can make copies of. You can make copies of anchors. In fact, when you start casting, you're going to find you're just going to want to make copies of all kinds of different things. Now, this is not really a big video on how to do castings, but we're going to talk about some of the basic techniques for doing castings. Now here you see our shelves, and I've put some tubing. K&S makes an assortment of tubing. Other companies does too. These are just little scraps, tiny little scraps that make good cans and buckets and things like that. So we're just going to take some of those and pretend that those are cans, and we're going to put them on our shelves. Got a couple of barrels there from some HO something or another. A little tool, a couple of little boxes, just odds and ends. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a mold of this. We're going to make an RTV mold of this. But before we do that, we need to secure those castings. Now you can even use something like a straw, but I find a straw is just a little too flimsy for my skills. I can't make that work very well. I like these little scraps of metal tubing. And you can take just a chunk of styrene, square it off, and put it on there to represent a closed box. You can stack them on top of each other. You can cut it to fit and make a lid for it. Lots of different things that you can do with these. Lots of different ideas of things that we can try. And what we're going to do now is we're really going to look at gluing them into place. So we're going to take just a little piece like this, and that would represent the side of a box. So we're just going to glue it in place. And here you can see I keep adding the other sides, and I glue it, and I end up with a box. Now notice I didn't even put a bottom on this box. When it's on the shelf and got stuff in it, you're not going to notice. So I've made a couple of little boxes there. Now I'm taking some of these metal castings, these metal pieces of tubing, and I'm dipping them into 5-minute epoxy, and I'm just going to set those in place. Just set those in place at various places around on these different shells. You want to take your time doing this. You want a small amount of epoxy. You want it to stick, but you don't want it to show. You can take a little piece like this, which looks like a drum head from an end of some type of barrel. When you put these on your shelf, make sure you don't put them over the edge, either to the front or to the back, and you want to have them right down towards the end, but it's always good to leave a little gap even at the ends, because these shells are going to be twisted and turned and stacked and used in different ways. And the main thing you want them to have is just a little bit of variety in the way they look. Sorry my head's in the way there, but I get a little enthusiastic sometimes and really looking closely at my work, and the camera catches me being just a little careless. Sorry. Here's that hinge. A little bit of epoxy on that. We'll just drop that on one of the shelves. Now you'll notice I'm not filling these shelves completely with any of this. And the reason for that, these are the parts that we're going to put in, that we're going to have as part of this shelf. Or when we make a mold and when we make castings from this shelf, they're all going to have these few things on them. But if you make about 6 of these shelves, there's going to be enough variety that unless somebody knows what you're doing, they'll never catch on to it. They'll never realize a lot of it is in common. So we're just continuing to add parts, trying to make it so that each of the shells looks quite different from the others. And with these round pieces I'm putting in, these are going to represent hollow containers or empty cans. A little later I'm going to show you how to make full cans out of the same things, but we're going to just start with hollow cans. So these are things you can stick paintbrushes in, or little bits of junk, whatever. You can fill it with a little red paint to look like a can of paint. Lots of different things. Now these are Lego blocks. If you don't have any Lego blocks, you should get some of these. These are wonderful to use. I use these a lot. Now, of course, you don't have to use Lego blocks. I've got them glued around here. I've got some regular modeling clay that I've pressed into the corners just to keep anything from leaking out. And I just roll up the modeling clay and push it in. Now, if you don't use Lego blocks, you can build these out of styrene, these dams. You can make them out of styrene. I've made them out of balsa, different things. I just find these Lego blocks are so convenient. They're so cheap, and you can make them as tall as you want, any size you want. Now, what I'm going to use for my RTV, this is RTV. This is from Alumilite. It's readily available here in Alaska. There's other brands of room temperature setting or room temperature vulcanizing mold making materials that you can use. But I use the kind from Alumilite because they're willing to ship it to me. And when you buy the starter kit, you get a little measuring cup, you get some of these little containers here, and it tells you just how much to mix them. So there's a certain percentage, and you do this by weight. This has to be pretty critical, or this stuff will never set up. So you want to do this very carefully. Just follow the instructions for the kind you use. Now you're going to pour these into a cup. That's very slow stuff. You certainly don't want to watch me pour all that in. But here I've added the catalyst, and you stir. And when you stir, you try to blend it without putting a bunch of air bubbles in there, because air bubbles, if you got air bubbles in there, those air bubbles are going to show up as bumps. Once you've mixed it, then you want to pour it into place. And again, this is really slow. And that's what you'd want to do. You want to start in one corner and just let this sort of flow across your model and around and down into everything. Keep that stream pretty thin. See, I've got a very thin stream there. Now for me to accomplish this pour takes a couple of minutes, but you just really have to be careful at it. And again, try not to get any air bubbles in there. And just sort of let it flow and ebb. This stuff will flow around your castings. Okay, so here it's getting more full. And I'm just adding it right on top of the other stuff, and it's just flowing into here. And you just want to fill the whole thing. Now the thickness, follow the manufacturer's recommendations on how thick to do it. My mold there is about a 1/2 inch tall, and I fill it about 2/3 of the way up. Now if you run out of this RTV, if you didn't mix enough, you can always add more later. It'll stick to the original pour. So if you need to add more, just add more. Now what I've done, once I've got it in there, I'm taking a stick and I'm going around and I'm trying to free up any air bubbles. Now you don't want to knock those castings loose on those shelves. So be careful, but still trying to get all the air bubbles out. You can shake it, you can reach down under the table, you can thump the table, lots of different ways, just trying to get out as many of the bubbles as you can. Now you don't really care about those bubbles that you see there. Those are not going to be part of your finished casting. So here I'm shaking underneath. If you do this a lot, you might want to get an orbital sander or a saber saw. Take the saw blade out of the saber saw and bolt it to your surface and just turn it on and let it do the vibrating as you pour and as you're doing this. Once you do that, you got to let it dry. Make sure your surface is flat. Let this dry. In my case, I let this dry overnight. Now removing the mold, different ways of doing it. I just cut right through that clay and go right around the outside. Right inside that plastic dam. Make the cuts all the way around. And then just start working that stuff loose. Take your time doing this. You don't want to tear your mold. These molds are pretty strong, but you can certainly tear them. And you just want to work it loose. And before long, it just pops right off. So there's your mold, and you got the clay on it. I find to get the clay off, I use my X-Acto knife and sort of work it away from the surface in 1/4, and then you can just sort of unroll it like this. Just roll it and it'll pick up itself and go right around the whole thing and pick it up. Just like that. So there's our casting material. Okay, now what we got to do is we got to remove this. Now be very careful in doing this. Don't try to pull it off quickly. Take your time, work. Now the reason you want to be so careful is not because these are fragile molds. No, they're going to last forever. But because this mold is going to give you the opportunity to have many, many, many castings. You can use it over and over and over again. So you want to take your time with it. You don't want to be too quick in doing this. And I've done a lot of molds, so I know how much I can apply pressure, and I just work all the way around. And sometimes there's going to be, like down inside one of those bits of tubing, it's going to be a little bit stuck, like right there. See that? You may need to reach in there with your fingers and pull it out of that tube. You want to make sure it stays intact. And there's another one of those little troubling spots. But again, working with it carefully, reaching in, you can pull it loose, and before long you're able to remove that mold. You get it all done, and there's your mold. May want to trim it up a little bit around the sides, but it's ready to use. Now, for the casting material itself, here I'm using aluminite sister, they're casting resins. This is very good. It sets up very fast, but I like the fact that it's 2 different colors. It has sort of a natural wood color. So this you mix in equal portions according to the manufacturer's instructions, and you want to stir it. And you have to be pretty quick in stirring. You got to be pretty quick because you don't have a lot of working time with this. Now, Micromark makes some casting material I really highly recommend. I've been using it lately, and I find I like it even better than the aluminite material. So just stir. You want to try to not get bubbles in it, of course. Now, I had to heat this mold with this particular resin in the microwave, so my wife dropped it off. Now I'm just pouring it into those cavities there. And the excess, we just have to waste it. Sorry. Now you can do the easy way of just scraping it with a piece of wood, like the piece of wood you actually use for stirring it. Now you don't care about this stuff you scrape off the top. You just want to get it off the top so that it makes cleaning up your castings easier and keeps them nice and thin. So that's one way to do it. You can use a piece of wood like this and just get rid of your excess like that. Some people just take a heavy object and lay it on top of there, like a piece of glass and some weight to force it out. Once it's dry, and again you let it dry plenty long, you remove the castings from the mold material. Now your casting itself, when you first do this, it's going to be pretty flexible to start with. So again, just as in the past, you want to be very careful removing your mold away from your casting. Take your time. I lay it on a flat surface and just work around in a circle, and before long it comes off. And here you can see how it's flexible. If you watch that casting a bit, you'll see it bend a bit as I work here, pulling this off. But you just want to get it free. Okay, and they'll just pop out like that. And then all you need to do is trim around your shelves, and your shelves are ready to work with. Now, it takes a lot of practice to sort of get the hang of this. What happens is you get a piece like this to where the box may be okay, but over here there's a little glob of something there, and that can's half missing. Well, you don't have to throw that away. You can just lay a piece of cloth over that can. You can put a rag or something over the part there that's bad. But we really want our castings to be better quality. So here's what we do. When we pour it, it's time we pour it on. And again, you have to work quick with this. Now, I'm going to take that stick and actually beat the casting and move it around, trying to get any air bubbles out of there. See, I actually work those little pieces around and make sure I get all the air out of there, working as quick as I can. I use a little hand timer to make sure I don't spend too much time. Now once you got it in place, what I really like to do is use a piece of cardboard or a business card to do this. And that way it's very easy. Don't worry about the other stuff that's left on there. It peels off very easily, but that's my preferred way of doing it. Now once you've made a mold of open containers of cans, this is how you can make full cans out of them. Just mix some epoxy and put it in a drop at a time, being very careful. You don't want it to flow over the outside, but just put drops of epoxy in there. And then after the epoxy itself has a little bit of time to settle, then you can actually run your toothpick or your applicator across the top and take off any excess. But what we're doing here is we're turning these empty containers into full ones, or if you fill it just half full, then you can have a half full container. So again, when we're going to make another set of mold over the same one we used before. The only thing different is you can add a few more details if you want. You can fill these containers, again, just so they look different from your other batch. Now I've only made 3 here that I'm using for this illustration, but you can make a bunch of these, and you can pour these in fairly large batches if you want. So here we see the comparison of the two. On the left are the full containers, on the right are the empty containers. See the difference right there? So when we make our castings, they actually look different. Simple little variation. Now for the sides of the shelf, this shelf's going to be 6 feet tall, 2 feet deep, and I just wanted the shelves to be so that they were about 2 feet each. You can make these different sizes. And the way I put those little supports in is I do it this way rather than separately. By doing it this way, I can actually use the template of the graph paper to get them straight. Then just simply trim them off like this. And you can make a casting of this if you want, so that you can make a lot of multiples. Or you can just go ahead and use it just as it is. And that's what we're doing here. So here I've got 4 shelves. And again, this one closest to here is longer, and the one at the top is longer. Those go on the top and the bottom of the shelves. Now you notice they're pretty much the same. But if you just turn them from one end to the other, then they will look different when they're actually made. So we're going to glue one on the top like that. Going to turn it the other way and glue the other one right on the bottom like that. And for this I use epoxy. So we're just going to put a little bit of epoxy at the top. And we're just going to glue it using the graph paper to get a nice square corner. Very easily done. Just like that. Of course you want it to be straight, and you want it to set up completely. So I've got that block of wood that I use. It's got one corner cut off so the glue doesn't stick to it. And I'm going to put it up against the inside of the shelves. I've got to get my head in the way, of course. And then just something on the other end to keep it straight, and then let it set up completely. And while that one sets up, you go to work on another piece somewhere else. Now once that one end is dry, you repeat it on the other end. Very simple. Again, that white portion is from plastic, but you could make a casting of it from RTV as well, if you wanted to do that. But for the purposes of demonstration here, I'm just going ahead and using the plastic. And we just want to, it needs a bunch of variety of different things so you can prop it up just right. That bottle of Elmer's glue comes in very handy for doing things like this. Pretty small, so you got to work with it carefully. Now, once you've got it done on one side, well, you're just going to put the shelf in on the other side. Again, you're just going to put some epoxy along the top of the shelf, the side of the shelf there, and along the bottom. And we're just going to put that in place. Very easy to do. And then we're going to, of course, let that set up and dry completely. Fortunately, with epoxy, you're only talking about 15 or 20 minutes. And I find I can keep 3 or 4 little projects like this going and just move from one to the next. So there's the beginning of our shelf. Now we need the other shelves. So you can epoxy these in position, or for starting out you can just leave them in position. But I'm going to put a backing on here. I'm going to put a backing on here. It can be on the front or the back. Just pick the part that looks the best to you. And again, I'm just using some 1-foot pieces of styrene, 1/4 inch in O scale, 1/8 inch, or just 12 scale inches in HO scale. I build these things in 1/4 inch scale because it's so much easier to film them. HO, these principles work just as well in HO. It's just harder to get a good video of them. And we just start at one side and put the board. Now I've got the board sort of overhangs at the top. And I like that because if I were building shelves, that's how I'd build them. I'd build them with a little support at the back so those items on the top shelf wouldn't get pushed to the back and fall down behind those shelves. Now you can make these shelves as tall as you want or as low as you want. You can, after you get them built, you can glue several of them together. You can do all kinds of different things with them. But we're just showing you here the principles of making nice, easy shells. And after you get these done and made a couple, you can crank out a bunch of these in a hurry. Okay, we get them lined up. I wanted some gaps in them. I sort of like gaps in things. And I just lay it down and tap along the top to make sure it squares up at the bottom. There you can see I've got the two shelves in place now. You can see a little light coming through the back because of the gaps. So there's just all kinds of different shelves. Very quickly you make a whole bunch of them. Now I've sprayed this a dark gray. I use Krylon paint. I wanted to spray it a dark gray just to show you how I paint and weather plastic so that it looks like old wood. There's different ways of doing this. This is one of the easiest ways, and that's what I'm going to be doing here. So I'm going to be using some of Dr. Ben's aged driftwood, and I just want to paint the inside, all around the inside and the outside of this, and I just want to get it covered at this point. I never put the paint on really thick. I want it to go on, and I want it to go on pretty evenly, but I don't paint it on so thick that it's very even. Now I'm using some of Uncle Ben's natural pine. Now here, this looks terrible when I first start doing this, but you got to realize there's a lot of steps involved in actually making this plastic look like old weathered wood. Of course, my way of doing this is not the only way of doing it. It just happens to be the way that works well for me. So when I paint this pine on here, you notice I'm not covering it completely. I'm just painting it in sort of stripes, but I'm leaving a lot of the earlier material showing through. Then I often take my finger and just run my finger across it, not so much to fill it in, but to get rid of any sharp edges. It just softens the edges. Okay, now here on the end of it, again, this has had a coat of the driftwood on there, the aged driftwood, and now I'm just putting some of this natural pine color on. I'm not painting it a solid color. Now here I've got some of Dr. Ben's natural basswood. When this dries, this looks very much like the color of actual wood. So what I'm going to do is dry brush technique. Dry brush technique is you put a little tiny bit on a small brush, and then you get most of the paint off. And I'm just doing it right there on that surface. I need just a little bit more than that. And you just sort of have to work with this. And when you do this, don't be in a hurry. You know, when I think of details on a model, I recognize I'm going to have that model the rest of my life. If I take the time to work on it and do the very best job now, it's something that's always going to be something that I have, that I'm proud of. It's even something that when I'm gone, my grandkids or my daughter, somebody like that, might like to have a nice one of my models on their shelf someplace. They may not. They may burn this stuff. But hopefully they want to keep a little bit of it. But anyway, I always take all the time in the world. I'm never in a race. To me, I'm not trying to get to the finish line. I just enjoy the drive. It's like driving coast to coast. You can get in your car and drive 70 miles an hour straight across the country on the interstates and get there real quick. Or you can drive along and say, hey, that's an interesting road. I wonder what's up that road. And you get off and you drive up that road. Well, that's how I am with my modeling. I want to take my time and enjoy it. I experiment a lot with different things. I read a lot of articles. I talk to people. When I'm at conventions, I like to go to clinics that people are giving on weathering. Sometimes I adapt their principles. Sometimes I don't. Okay, so I'm continuing to use this natural basswood. And you'll notice I'm not really painting it that cream color. At no point am I painting it that cream color. I'm just putting trace amounts of it on. Just very small amounts. And I do it all the way around the inside, on the top, on the bottom, and all around the outside as well, using very small amounts. If I get too much on, I can go back over it with the other paints to tone it down a bit. Just work now here along the top. This is an area that's very easily seen, so I want to be careful with it, but still you can just do a lot there. Now that box will stand out better if I paint it that cream color to look like natural wood. So I'm going to paint heavier amounts of it on there. Quite a bit heavier amounts, because I want that to have a fresher look than this old shelf. I want it to look like that box hasn't been up there nearly as long as this shelf has been there. And these contrasts in the colors and the textures and everything just really add an awful lot to how these little details add up and improve the appearance of your model. Of course, you always want to be careful and take your time while painting these things. Now some of these cans up here, we'll go ahead. I'm not going to show me painting them silver because we all know how easy that is to do. And I use Tester's silver paint. Very small bottles, and I like to use fresh ones all the time. And we can just paint those cans so that they're silver. But here we're working on this shelf. Now what I'm doing here is I'm taking some of that and I'm just highlighting along the very front edge. That's partially just to bring out the appearance of it, like where I highlight a little bit on that whatever that was back in there, but also because the edges sometimes wear. So it's just a good way to bring out a little bit of highlight color. And I'm going to be working after it's dried. See, now I've worked over this surface once, and after it's dry I'm going to come back and add a little more, and I'm going to try to treat it like a board at a time. So each board, those two boards, are actually treated differently there. Lots of different things you can do with this, but this is something that works for me. So I just want to continue on until it looks, has that look that I want it to have. It's looking pretty good. Okay, now here I'm going to use some realistic oak. This is Dr. Ben's realistic oak. Now that box that I painted earlier up on top now is completely dry. So I'm going to take the finest brush I have, and pick some little bit of paint up, and I'm actually going to go very carefully and paint what looks like some cracks in these boards. It helps bring out the grain that would be in the wood. It's not going to show really well. When somebody looks at one of my buildings, they don't really notice that. But if it's not there, you can tell that it's not there. Just taking the time to add little things like this just can really help improve the appearance of your models. Now when we have these shelves, we've got these crates, these boards, we've got these cans. They're just very, they may be well weathered and everything, but they still don't have any real interesting look to them. So I'm going to put some labels on them. Now I buy a Walther's HO scale catalog every year, and what I do is every year, at the end of the year, I go through and I tear out all the pages that are of interest to me. I just really look for things like that little sign, Willard. Little things like this. You can use these signs on your models. Now, these are decal sets or dry transfer sets that you can use. But see, here on the page, you can cut those out, those little tiny samples, and glue those on your cans. You can glue them on your boxes, and really bring those boxes and crates and cans to life. Walther's catalog is full of them. Woodland Scenics has a wide variety that they show. Really clear. This is on good quality paper. They're well done. Very tiny. You can use these in O scale. You can use these in HO scale, S scale. Just a wide variety. And not only Woodland Scenics, but other companies in there. These are from JL Innovative Design. These are different oil cans and things. Now we can take some of the labels off of these oil cans, cut them out, glue them on some of our cans, and they'll look like actual cans. Cans of oil. So you always want to look for things like this. When I go through Reader's Digest or any kind of magazine, I'm always looking for little signs on buildings or anything that I can cut out to use to make little details. I've got a little drawer full of these. You know, whoever ends up with my collection of junk when I'm gone, they're going to wonder what kind of nut was it that gathered this kind of stuff. If it's a model railroader, they'll understand, but hopefully it goes to somebody who knows what it is, because I've got a lot of interesting stuff. So here's our wood. See how that looks pretty good, you know, for plastic wood. For plastic painted, I think that looks quite a bit like old weathered wood. But these boxes, again, they're just a little plain, and I've painted these silver down here. They're still a little plain. So we're just going to take a few minutes here, and we're going to show how I actually put these different details on here. Just showing you some of the different details here that I have that we've cast. And we're going to start with these up here. We're going to put a little label on there. And for putting the label on, of course, you want to take your time cutting out your labels so they look nice. But we're going to use Elmer's glue again, and we're just going to put a drop right on there. Of course, that's too much glue. We don't want to use all that glue, but that's what we're going to start with, is that amount right there. We're going to pick it up with tweezers, and we're going to put it on there. Okay, so we put it on there, and we work first with tweezers, trying to get it in position, because you want these to be on there straight. You don't want them to be on there crooked. You want to be careful. But there's often too much glue, so I just wipe it off with my thumb. Main things we want to make sure there's enough glue to really hold this there. But the nice thing about Elmer's glue, it just really disappears. You have to be really careless with Elmer's glue to have enough on there for it to show. And you just want to press it in place with your finger like that. And you end up with a nice can. Now here, putting the glue on the back and then taking it off on my finger before going to apply it. And I'm applying it to that next little can there. Just like so. Sort of hard to see with my fingers in the way, but you got the idea of what I'm doing there. Just working on that and getting that all the way around there. And just use your X-Acto knife and just press it down. And you want these labels so that people can see them. You know, that's the nice thing. You want the nice part sticking out forward. And the Elmer's glue is tacky enough to hold these thin pieces of paper in place. You don't have to do anything special other than get them on there. Once they're on there, let them dry, and that'll be good. Okay, so we got two little cans up there. You know, like I can see it needs a little more help. Very good. Okay. Now that box could use a label on the side of it as well. So we'll take something that looks appropriate and is the right size, and we'll fit it to that box. By having such a wide variety of signs available, you can find all kinds of things that are just the right size. See how that's going to fit on there? That's going to look like a label that was actually on that real box. Again, I've got the Elmer's glue on it. Just slide it into position. Press it down. It's important to press it down. Get out the air and the excess glue from underneath. If there's excess glue, you can pick it up again with a dry brush. That's a very small dry brush, but see, it just picks it up very nicely. And we let that dry. You continue doing this on all your shelves, and you end up with shelves that have really nice looking details on them. So you got the tools, you got the cans and everything. This is how the shelf looks once you've got some of the details, the labels on the cans there and everything. It just looks pretty good. Now what I've done here is I've added a few more details into some of the boxes and things like that. And you've got nice looking little shelf there. Something you made yourself. Next we're going to talk about boxes and crates. Now here's some signs that I had that I got off of eBay. And I shrunk them down so it's going to work well in our scale. Now here I'm using wood instead of our casting material. This is a little different than what we used before, but again I use Elmer's. Smear it on there, just put the label on. Now I find labels, you go on eBay, we know they sell model railroading kits and things, but they also sell labels for fruit boxes and things like that, and labels for cans. So you just do a search for labels and you'll find all kinds of interesting things. You just download them, print them out, scan them, and shrink them down in size, and you can get interesting labels for all kinds of boxes. Again, after you put the label in place, you want to press it down and squeeze out all the air. Now what you can do is when you get this on there, you can then trim that piece so it's just the right length. So rather than getting a label that fits your size wood, make your size wood fit the label. So you just want several pieces like that. And we're going to glue them together. And here, another little trick I use is to take a couple of cases for CDs or DVDs, lay them down, and use those to make a square. Or I have a little wood cutting device and a razor saw holder. It's actually a wide variety of different things that you can use to make sure pieces dry quickly. So I do these a bunch at a time, of course. Very easy to do this way, and you can make pretty good progress this way. Just want to take your time to make sure these are done right. You know, these are flexible. Once the glue is set, they're flexible to a degree, but not very much. But just try to get them straight. Then, of course, you want to finish up on the other side. Again, tiny amounts of glue. This glue is actually pretty strong for wood. And you just want to make sure you got a nice square box. Now, flip them over, and then we're going to put little bits of Elmer's glue along on the back because we're going to glue some slats of wood on these. Now the size wood you use, it's always interesting about boxes. We see a lot of boxes that are available from Keebri and Volmer and just all kinds of different companies, but they never look like really good boxes to me. I actually went online and just did a lot of research on wooden boxes. The U.S. government actually had a little booklet out on how to build wooden boxes years and years ago. And just a strange source of things you can find. But you know, when you look at actual boxes, now I worked in a packing shed, so these boxes are very similar to the kind that I used to stack as a boy. They'd bring the fruit in these boxes, and I would after they had been dumped, I would stack the boxes so they could on pallets so they could be taken out. So I'm very familiar with these. And we just put a few labels on the end of them. We had those labels on there before, and you can just stack these. Just leave them just like they are and have some nice little boxes. Or you may want to take a little bit of time and individualize them, and that's what I like to do. It's fine to have the boxes, but we want to make them so they're different. Again, using the back side of my X-Acto knife. The back side. I'm going to just scrape along, put some grains in there. Just cut right through that Dr. Ben's driftwood, aged driftwood stain. Just cut right through it, and that exposes a little bit from underneath. And a little bit of the wood color can show through. That's different things you can do. When you think about them, you can think about different things you may want to do. You may want to have one of the boards broken. So I'm actually going to sit here and just punch little all the way through the wood a few times so that I actually have some of these boards that are actually so I can break it out. And just push on it and you can have it break, you can have it go all the way through, you can have it missing. In this case I'm going to have it missing. If I can ever get it off of there, I'm going to. But anyway, you get the idea of what I'm doing there. Yeah, so there's a piece that's missing. That's something that's pretty common on these boxes. Now, of course, you don't want all your boxes beat up, but a few here and there really looks good. I flip the box over. I'm just going to take a stick and press down right in the middle and just bust one of the boards. Just like that. I'm going to leave it there just so the busted part shows through like that. Now I'm going to take some of Dr. Ben's natural pine, and while I stained these with the aged driftwood to start with, I want to make it look like they've been in use. You know, the boxes that they brought the fruit in the packing shed when I was a kid, they picked up a lot of stains over the year and a lot of rough treatments. So the colors were all varied. You know, they were all sort of a weathered gray, of course, but there was a lot of variation in the boxes. So we're just putting some of the natural pine in here, different amounts of it. Some of them it just pretty much covers it, some of them it's just a little touch, some of them I don't put any. Now here I'm using some of Dr. Ben's powders. These are excellent little powders, and this is a black. And what we do with this powder, we don't put a large amount down in these boxes, but pick up just a little bit on the tip of a brush and sort of rub it around in there. That combined with the other colors makes it look pretty dirty. Now here we're using some of the natural basswood again, and again, as we did earlier on the shelves, we're just going to provide a little highlight all the way around. Now this technique works just as well on plastic as it does on wood, and just as good on wood as it does on plastic. Really nice materials. Dr. Ben actually has a very large line of pigments and stains, just some really valuable pieces. I've only been able to use a few of them in this video, but I highly recommend that you investigate them. They're economically priced, just really nice materials. Plus, the guy that makes them, Richard Benjamin, he and his wife Debbie, they're nice people too. I've spent a lot of time with them at conventions over the years, had booths right next to them and got to know them pretty well. Really nice people, really good model builders. People who are really interested in helping you build good models. So now I'm adding a little bit more of this inside, and again just add a little bit. You know, with weathering, it's hard to take the weathering away, but it's easy to stop, and knowing when to stop is a real secret. Now what I've done here, I've actually got a sprue. This is from I think a Grant Line O-scale window, and what I'm actually doing is taking the sprue itself, it's black, and I'm going to, it's got parting lines on the side, so I'm going to file those down with an emery board. I really recommend getting a good supply of emery boards. I love emery boards. I have a large amount of them all the time, and they're just so handy. I find them to be about the best type of sandpaper that you can find, and they're cheap. And what I do then is I take my sharp X-Acto knife, and I'm actually going to slice straight across on this sprue. Actually, a sharp knife would help. Mine's pretty dull. But we're just going to start cutting off little pieces of that. And those little round tubular pieces of plastic like that are going to look like cans or little bits of odds and ends. And these are the type things that you can stick in your boxes. You can put odds and ends in there like that, different things, and then you can add a few real castings that you may have. But that really extends your castings that you've bought if you fill it with junk that's sort of nondescript. And when people look at your model, these little things look just as good as the other things. They may not be able to identify it, but they can see it's there. Of course, you can paint these if you want. You don't have to use them just straight black. Now you can even take a window casting itself and just cut up the window casting. We know that's a window casting, but when you cut it up and put just part of it in there, it looks like a piece of scrap angle iron. Another little piece, just fine to put in there. See that little scrap of angled iron? You just throw that in one of your boxes. Dress up the ends a little bit. Make sure they're nice and square. And just drop that in your box. There's just all kinds of little odds and ends that you can drop into your box and really make it useful. Now here I'm taking some automotive wire. Now this happens to be black coating on the outside. It can be any color. And I say automotive wire because automotive wires, first off, is fairly stiff, yet inside it's multiple strands rather than one single strand. I like that because you can pull it out easy, because you pull out just a few at a time. So I cut it at an angle and reach in with my dikes and just grab a strand or two and pull it out and set it aside. You can save these little wires. These little wires can come in real handy to make all kinds of different things with your details, or just to tie things together to represent real fine twine or something like that. These in and of themselves are very handy. But what we're after here is we're after that outside casing. I want to straighten it out, cut it off square, and cut off other lengths. And what you do with different sizes of wire, you can end up with different sized pieces of little tubing that look like cans. Now again, you can paint these if you want. You can just lay a handful of these out on a board and spray them with a silver spray, and they'll look good. Or you can just drop them in there black and they'll still look good. Little cheap things like that. These kind of details, they're everywhere around us. All you gotta do is use them, and like I say, they make good fill, so you put just one or two good castings on top and it really looks like you got a great box of stuff. So even these little bits of copper we pulled out, well, you can crimp those with your tweezers and twist them around and end up with a coil of wire, which can be actually a coil of copper if you want it to look like that. You can do different things with this. Crush it down and just throw it in your box. It's just a little scrap of wire that somebody saved from some project. Most scrap boxes I've been around are just filled with all kinds of interesting different junk. There's some rope. There's some rope I made out of twine, put in one. Different some of the boxes there, and that's how they're displayed on one of my models. And right next to it is a large crate with a seagull up on top. A beat up crate, but that's a good crate. So let's build a model of one of those. This is a larger crate. So I have this one to use as an example. So I just, you can just sort of visualize the dimensions there. We want to cut a few boards to represent the front and the back side of this. Again, I've stained these to start with the Dr. Ben's aged driftwood. Now, what I happen to be using here is 1/8 in 1/4 inch scale. 1/8 are nice. You can use 1/6s. You can use 2/6s. You can even make this a solid block of wood if you want, and just actually glue pieces around the outside. You can do that. I don't have a piece of wood that size, or I'd probably do that just to make it easier. But what we're trying to show you is, rather than how to build an exact model of this thing, is techniques. Now here I've glued those strips together, and I've put little squares of wood on the inside, and you notice I've left gaps on all 4 corners. Well, what I'm going to do for the ends, I'm going to build the ends. These are cut out of the same size material, and I'm going to glue those together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue a strip of wood, if I get my shoulder out of the way, so that it actually fits into that slot. See that? That's how we're going to glue that strip. We're going to glue it in that position. Okay, we're going to do it like that, okay? So we put our glue on there. And the reason we do this is this makes it sort of lock together. You'll see when I get this done how this works. There is a method to my madness for sure. Too bad you can't see what's going on. You get a good shot of one of my favorite blue shirts. Okay, so I just glue that on there, and we don't care about the glue showing on this. This is going to be the inside of this box. Of course, the nice thing about making a box like this is you can also have it open and have some Excelsior or something like that on the inside. You can have boxes of stuff. So there I've got those pieces. I'm going to cut it so that it actually folds up like that. So there's the first piece. There's the second piece with the pieces trimmed, and that just locks together like that. See that? So it just takes a little bit of glue and that locks together. So we just add a little bit of glue. And we put it together. We let it dry. And then we repeat for the other side, of course. And when we're done, we end up with a nice little square box like that. There's our square box. Well, now that doesn't look too good right there, does it? So we're going to need to make some improvements on that. So there's little gaps there at the corner. Well, those don't really make a difference. Because what we're going to do is we're going to add some bracing on the outside of that box. See, I've got those pieces there. Well, we're going to add bracing just like that to this model that we're building here. So we're going to start by getting some glue. I've cut my pieces already. I'm going to run some glue across the top. Right across the middle. You can eyeball this, it doesn't have to be exact. And then right across the bottom. Just like that. And then we're going to pick up 3 pieces of wood. We're going to make sure they fit flush at the top and pretty straight in the middle. We're going to try to get that one straight. We'll straighten it up in a second. And then one flush at the bottom. I want to make sure they're flush at the top and the bottom. Don't want them overhanging, but we do want them to reach all the way to the bottom. So I do that by turning it down and pressing on it and actually moving it down. Doing the same at the other end with my tweezers, just pushing it down against my surface there. That squares it up, and then we're just going to straighten out that piece there in the middle. And we're going to press those down. We're going to let them dry. Now next we're going to add some pieces here. These pieces here that run for vertical support to strengthen, and then that board that goes through the middle. Okay? So the vertical board we're going to start with, and again, just add a little bit of glue at the corner. And we want to make this flush with the ends. Now when we add the pieces on the ends, we're going to make them so they're flush with these boards. So they're just a little bit longer. And we just add those like that. Press them in place. Let those dry. And then we'll flip it over. Do the exact same thing on the opposite side, of course. Okay, so we're ready. This is dried. We're ready to do the next part, which we're going to add some cross braces. Very simple. Using some nice thin material, the same as we use for our other braces here. I'm going to start by putting the dots at the opposite ends, and that makes it easy to sight where to put it in the middle. And then we're just going to take our piece that we've cut and fit to position and drop it into place, press it down, make sure it's straight, get rid of any glue that sticks out, let it dry. There we go, we got the sides. Now we're going to do the ends. We're going to do exactly the same thing at the ends. Now you can see there's a little bit of gap there at the edges, so we want to cover that. We're just going to put we're going to put the glue on the wood this time rather than on the box itself. Okay, and again we push those into place. We're going to line those up with that brace on the end. Yeah, we want to overlap that in the corner to make it strong. Do the same thing on the opposite side, of course, and we do it on the other end as well. A little bit of glue, and we just put it into place, just like that. Easily done. Now we're going to add a brace across at the top, brace across at the bottom, and we're going to put one right in the center. Okay? Now I don't really need a diagonal brace on this end because it's so skinny. You generally only need a diagonal brace on the other end, but if you wanted a brace, you could do one. You could put one there. Leave off that center part and put a diagonal brace. There's our basic box. Now we just line up the pieces that go across the top, and we can fit them together. Sometimes, as you've noticed, I like to leave gaps with things. So you can either put them real close together or with gaps. Now as I'm gluing these brace parts on the edge here, look at those pieces of wood. You'll see that as I stain my wood and as I may work with my wood, I make it different strengths of stain. I try to make it so that it's going to look like individual boards when it's done, rather than a piece of scribe siding. So why go to the effort of building something like this if it's going to look like it's made from scribe siding? Another thing about something like this, there's just so many different varieties of boxes. And again, just look for boxes, look for old photos of boxes, do online searches for boxes. You'll find lots of accurate information on how they actually built crates, and have good ideas on what to build. This just makes a very simple little box, just as easy as doing that. We want to straighten these up. We want it to be fairly neat. Now if you wanted, you could put nail holes on here, or nail heads, by poking it, using a tip of a sharp pencil and spinning it in place. Lots of different ways. But I find a lot of people don't like to have these nail holes showing. They think they're unrealistic. I like them, but I don't take the time to do them here. But what I am going to do is I am going to roughen up this wood. See how I've roughed up the pieces in the center there? Now I'm roughing these up. I'm doing this all with the back of my number 11 X-Acto blade. Very common tool. I use it a lot. I've got a lot of things for roughing things up. I've got dental spurs, burrs. I've got I've got a compass, old compass I've had for 30 years. It's bent that I really like. You can even put knot holes in. Now if you put a knot hole in, there's different ways. You can drill a hole, stick a toothpick in there, glue it in place, and then cut it off and have a real knot in there. You can drill a hole and have an actual knot hole. I'm pretty much content most of the time using this compass. This is one I spoke about. Just elongating that hole, roughing up that surface a bit to get rid of the fuzz that's on it, and then just taking a little bit of stain and washing it on there. Okay? So here I'm using some of that Dr. Ben's stain just to add a little darkness to this. See, I'm not covering the whole thing. I've mixed it with a little bit with alcohol to make it pretty thin. And I'm just lightly putting it on there so that it goes into the cracks. So it really helps the grain. So when you put these stains on, or when you put the powders on, you can mix a little alcohol with them after they're on or as you're applying them. Practice with different ways of using it. You'll enjoy using these stains, and you'll enjoy these simple to make details. Try to make it so that each board looks like a distinct board. And taking a little natural basswood, this is Dr. Ben's natural basswood that we've used before, going across, just highlighting a little bit on the surface, adding a little bit of color to it. If you get it on too strong, just rub it off with your finger. If you don't like the way it looks, like there, just rub it in a bit. And what we're trying to do is we're not trying to paint this whole thing again. We're just adding A little bit of highlight to it. A little bit of highlight. Well, we're drawing to a close here. Our 2 hours is up. Hope you've gotten some ideas here about how I make these simple little projects. These are fun. They don't take a lot of time. I find a lot of times I don't have time for a large project. But I can almost always find 10 or 15 minutes to build a box, build a crate, and just think about the different things you can use. And just experiment with different techniques, different methods like these stains here, different ways of doing things, and have fun building your models. Take care.